9:25 p.m. on it doesn't really matter what day. We're here, okay? Um I was just about to go to sleep, but earlier today I have had like this strong pull to talk about this. It's been a while since I've talked about misogynoir, right? I don't even think I say it right. I don't care. But excuse me. I recall making a video about it because I had an automatic writing um back in back I think it was in 2019, talking about how um black men were like highly offended by the welfare system's changes that really only benefited the woman. We're going to talk about public assistance for a minute, because a lot of people, even with the new implemented changes, a lot of people are not understanding how that shit works, and they make a whole bunch of myths surrounding public housing. One of those is that men can't live in it and it's just for women. There's like, in this apartment complex, there are, excuse me, 4 units that are just for single individuals. And then there are 6 that are for elderly. Like, they have it split. Um, just a single person, maybe that gets disability, but they're not elderly. And then they have elderly, and then they have like family, right? So let me tell you, um, out of those single ones, 3 men occupy those. Out of 4, there's 4 of them, and 3 men occupy those, right? Um, like almost directly across the street from me, the leaseholder is a man, and he be cycling women. Well, he doesn't now, I don't think. I think he's been stuck with the chick he's got. But when he first moved here, he was cycling through women and just bringing women in, add them to the lease, taking them off, add them to the lease, taking them off. The majority of people that live here are couples. Next door is a couple. Um, 2 doors down is a couple. Like I said, dude across the street. Then next door, they're a couple. The people, they just moved out, but they were a couple. There used to be a couple on the corner here. There's a couple. There's 2 couples on that building. C building, all couples, and not all of them are married. They're just, boyfriend, girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? Black men and men in general have created this narrative that they cannot benefit from public housing, but for black men, it's a big one. It's a very big dig. You know what I'm saying? They always say that women can't, um, they're getting all the benefits and they can't, you know, what about men? And I'm telling you, in this place, that oh, in fact, not to be like telling the neighbors teas and whatnot, but one of these people has 2 families here. His baby mama lives here, and then he lives with his girl here. Okay, so there's this myth that black men cannot benefit from public housing. There's this myth that, like, that guy that came here several years ago, he was talking about this, and I tried to explain to him that I was like the one of the only people here that doesn't have a partner. And like, in terms of being in a family housing, because my apartment is a family apartment. Like, a single person couldn't live here unless they had a child, like in this 2-bedroom apartment. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm one of the few that occupies a 2-bedroom apartment and doesn't have a partner, right? But he was saying, you know, Men can't even live in here with you and blah blah blah. That is such a outdated myth. It's not true. The reason here, we're going to explain to you the reason why it's common that black men cannot live here, because you can't have a fucking record and the majority of you do. They don't really give a fuck if you do not bring income in here. They do not, I mean, because it's subsidized housing. It is based off your income. So someone could come live here with me and be on this lease, not have a job, not have any income whatsoever, as long as they have like semi decent credit. And when I say semi decent, I'm talking like 600s. I think the lowest is like 620, right? As long as you have a score of 620 and you do not have a criminal record or a violent record, because the reason you can't have a violent record is because there's also a clause in which women can get in here regardless of their credit if they've experienced domestic violence. So you can't bring somebody here that has a you're putting those people in danger when their reason for being here is because they experienced domestic violence. Okay, so that's black men. Whether this isn't about per capita, okay, but black men have a higher rate of domestic violence. Black men have a higher rate of gun charges. Now, we do know that there's a system in place that inappropriately charges people, black people, you know, they're more policed. So that would be the reason behind why they have a higher number, because, white people, all people do the same things. They're just less policed, so they get in less trouble. It doesn't mean that black people are more trouble than the other. It's just that they happen to have those higher rates, which means that keeps them out of these housings, these public housing places, unless you're breaking the law, okay? Because there's plenty of people that have brought, their partner into their housing and they're hiding them and they're not putting them on the lease. There's plenty of people that do that, white and black and Hispanic and Asian. But I've lived in not several, three subsidized units, and I've never seen an Asian. That's isn't that weird? But anyways, the point here is that there has been a myth that men cannot benefit from subsidized housing. And that is because they have created that, not realizing that, one, you have to be on the lease. Two, you can't have a record, but you are 100% allowed to be here. You are. It's a myth. And so, because of that myth, it further fuels your hatred for women, because you think women get a benefit that you don't get. And if you aren't allowed to be here, it would only be by your fault of either having a poor credit score or a criminal record. That's not really their fault. And so, then you have these women who don't have a problem with having men stay in their home and hiding them, and you think you have to be hidden, but the only reason you have to be hidden is because of your actions and your lack of accountability and your poor choices. You don't actually have to hide a man here. I just told you. There's a whole bunch of people out here that are couples. I'm one of the few people that lives here that does not have a partner. And the majority of these people are not even married. They're just boyfriend and girlfriend, sharing rent. And a lot of the times, what I see too is one person works, one person doesn't. One person has income, one person doesn't, and it varies. I've noted one couple where they don't want their children to be cared for by other people. So what they do is they take turns working. One year one works, the next year the other works, and I find that to be very, very kind of each other. I'm actually impressed by what I've observed. You know what I'm saying? So this little myth has created like a it's fueled more hatred for black women. And in the grand scheme of it, it creates hatred for all women. But I think that black women get it worse because there is this myth that when welfare rolled out, that the men had to be hidden. They couldn't have men in their house. They couldn't. There are certain stipulations, but a man was allowed and always has been. There's just rules, and you don't want to follow the rules. You have there's certain things that they're not telling in that story. Your grandpa, and because of history of men projecting and not being able to like own anything and living in a state of shame and guilt, they never tell the full story, right? So for decades now, they've been telling you that they can't benefit from public assistance and public housing and only women get that, when in fact, what they failed to mention is that they couldn't get in because of their own actions and their poor decisions. They have records. They have, domestic violence records or, poor credit because they don't know how to manage money. And then that woman will choose her children and herself and leave him behind. And he'll be like, man, these women, they getting all the benefits and they don't even, nobody even thinks of us. You know, that's the story. That's the story that's been pushed, but it's not the truth, right? So, here's some suggestions that I would suggest to people if they were possibly finding themselves between a rock and a hard place and they knew someone that lived in public housing, all right? And you wanted to date that person. Here's what I would do, okay? If I had a person right now and we weren't really in the best financial position in life, okay? Cuz I have income, all right? And there is no requirement for both parties to have income. Um I would pay the rent because when one person moves in and there's no, I know this sounds crazy. Okay, this sounds crazy, but I'm not above paying bills. But there has to be a very specific plan for it to work. And so I'm saying this because I feel like somebody needs to hear this. All right. I would pay the bills because as soon as you add a person, it lowers your rent in the first place. It's subsidized, meaning it's based off your income. It can't charge you more than 30% of your income. And then it's like, whew, I forget what the limits are, but it's like 20,000 a person, right? So you can't, if I had a family of three, I couldn't make more than $68,000, right? Okay. But again, it can't take more than 30% of your income, and it lowers as you add people into your house, right? So if I added one more person into my house and that person didn't have any income, my rent would actually go down. It would decrease. Okay. And then they can't take any school money. So if I decide to go to school and I get a loan, I get a grant, I get a scholarship or anything like that, they can't touch any of that money. That money does not count. They can't touch any of my back pay. So like let's say I get a big check from Social Security that they owe me for 3 years worth of time. They can't touch any of that money. All that money is mine. They can't make my rent go up, down. They can't be like, hey, you owe us back pay too. They can't do any of that, right? So In my personal situation, if I had someone move in here and they didn't have income, which is very unlikely though, I'm not likely, but if they did, okay, my rent would go down. Boop. I would pay the rent. I don't have a problem paying the rent. But what I would expect of the person, my partner, I would expect them to go to school. I would expect them to go to school when they get that money from the student loan, because the student loan will give you extra money. You know what I'm saying? The student loan will give you extra money. It doesn't come immediately because they got smart about that, because people used to just sign up for school, get the money, and then never go to school, right? So now what they do is they wait until you get to a certain point and then they'll drop that money on you, and you'll always have at least a couple $1,000s left over, right? You take that money, you give it to me. That's what you would do. And then you keep going to school, and that's what you do. And we live like that for the next 4 years. And when it's summertime, you go to work for a little bit. You do a little part-time job or something like that, so our rent doesn't go up too high. But then you stack your little money there, and then, um, yeah, you finish school, and then now we flip it, and now you pay bills because now you have a career, and then we do it all over again for me. Or by the time you have your career, now we can buy a house, and I can go to school. Or hold up, I totally forgot. I forgot. We both go to school. It's not like you go to school. I can go to school too. But that's what I would do. And I wish that a lot more people would think of that plan. There's some people that try to make like living in these like a long-term, my previous neighbor lived here for like 20 years. You know what I'm saying? Never did anything to change her situation, it looks like. But that's what I would do if I lived in public housing and I had a partner that didn't wasn't employed. And even then, you could still be part-time employed, go to school full-time, work part-time or whatever, because it's not like you just want to fully be dependent on me, you know what I'm saying? But like I said, school will give you money. Excuse me, your student loans and your grants and all that stuff, you'll have a little bit of extra money to hold on to contribute either, to myself. Then also EBT. People don't realize that for EBT, yeah, you can have somebody living in your house, but all you have to do on your application is check. They have a question on there that says, does this person eat meals with you? All you have to do is say no, and that person doesn't get any food stamps, but they can't tell you what to do with your food. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they do. They do tell you, like, this is your card, and do not feed anybody else with this food. I mean, we just saw a woman that she just got in trouble because she was making, like, but baking cookies or some shit, and they called that fraud. She was baking cookies and selling them, and they call that fraud. You know what I'm saying? So there are fine lines between it, but I mean, if you have the means to provide your own food, I guess it's not really a big deal, right? All I'm saying is that there are a lot of myths about how this shit works. And there's a lot of myths about like it not benefiting men at all. Okay? Now, if you're a single person and you're not disabled, you do have a work requirement. You do have a school requirement. They require, and so this is what I'm saying. If you're in school, that actually fits the requirements and you could get EBT. A lot of people don't like this shit, okay? But we're not in fucking 18th century poverty anymore, okay? These things are here to help you out. You're not going to be on it forever as long as you have a plan, okay? And it's not only for women, but a lot of men, and this video is specifically tailored to black men because it fuels your misogyny, okay? And how much hatred you have for women because you think only women are benefiting from public assistance when in fact there are avenues and there are things that you can obtain from the same system. You just don't do it. You're either too prideful, or you don't have the knowledge, or you're listening to these fucking myths of these lying ass narcissistic grandpas. Okay? Because this started with the granddaddies. Okay? Saying, oh, those women got the welfare and they don't even need a man in their house. It's pushing the man out of their house. I just told you I'm one of the few people out here that does not have a partner. That is a lie. And if a black man can't get in here, it's because he has a criminal record. And not even all crimes are included, because you can actually have theft on here. And I think you can have drugs on here. You just can't have a violent record. So we're just debunking all that. Okay? And hopefully someone who, so I feel like somebody needed to hear that. You'll have a good day. Or actually, it's evening. Why do I keep doing that lately? I know it's nighttime. Good night.